Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guildhouse. This is a weekly podcast where I, your host, Matthew Whitby, coincidentally dressed as a Bond villain this week, sit down with people all across the tabletop RPG and surrounding space. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by, I guess, my Bond equivalent. I don't know if that's apt, but Carl Vandal. Hello.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
No,
It's a pleasure to speak with you, Matthew.
No, likewise. How are we doing on this? I guess. Well, so in where I am at the moment, we've had snow. It's been cold.
You're a bit further up north than I am. I'm down in Essex area, and it's been nice and well, it's been cold. It's been pleasant. So yeah, I've had a few. Yesterday, I had to scrape the car for the first time this year.
I do like how that. Maybe that's just how British we are. It's the fact that it's been nice and cold. That's just that's what we deem as the threshold for nice. But again,
yeah. So you listen to our friends from the other side of the pond where they've got -30, and it's like, yeah, okay. You can have that.
Yeah, I think we're quite comfortable with our mild. Everything it's just mild. Our rain is never too severe. Our cold is never too severe. It's just mild, and we work well with that. But now that we've got the required weather talk out of the way, that is again, I think, our legal obligation as British people. Let's talk about some tabletop RPG stuff. So I guess, Carl, for the people kind of listening, then, what have you been making?
Well, for the last year, nearly a year, I've been publishing scenarios. I've got 9 now on DMsGuild. I've been publishing maps, unique backgrounds. There's 2 unique backgrounds I've done, and subclasses. 23 products to date.
Wow!
In less than a year.
Yeah, so, I mean that's what is it? That's pretty much on par for 2 a month.
Roughly, yeah. I worked out, and I did a big recap of it all just before New Year, and yeah, it does come out to roughly 2 a month. But yeah,
I was gonna ask. So, in coming up to a year, so when would your anniversary be then? It feels weird calling it an anniversary, but yeah, it's like the anniversary.
Quite literally, 24th of February.
Wow.
24th of February 2021 was when I released my first product on DMsGuild.
Nice, and
it kind of went live.
As I say, it sounds like you've kind of tackled a real kind of. I was about to say smorgasbord of products. I'm going to stick with that choice of verbiage. But yeah, it seems from even publishing maps. There's a little bit of art, a little bit of classes. What was kind of the I guess the first stepping stone? So what was your first thing that you published?
Well, the first one was a scenario called Hall of the Goblin King, and it's a continuation of Lost Mines of Phandelver. So it's literally based on an event that happened in the campaign that I was running, which started 2 years ago. Very first adventure, of course, very first scenario. They bump into the goblins in Cragmaw Caves, and they left one of them alive.
Yeah.
So he became a campaign recurrence. He kept turning up and annoying them every so often. And then I just had this idea, what was I going to do? Because we combined the 2 games, Lost Mine and Dragon of Ice Fire Pig. We combined them together.
Interesting.
So after 6 months of running that, we finished that. But I got so many other ideas, and I wanted then to move on. What was the next stage going to be? So I came up with a few concepts of my own and delved into what was available as well. And one of them was this little Dobrin, the goblin, who had been annoying them.
Wait, is the goblin called Doblin?
Dobrin, yeah, Dobrin.
Okay, fair,
yeah. We decided, or I made the decision. Yeah, he's bright enough and smart enough that he's going to become a king. So he took over South Crypt, set up a little kingdom in there, and Gundren turns around to them and goes, "There's an intruder in the local dungeon, local dwarven fortress. Do you want to get rid of them?"
Yeah.
And the basic concept was that's what it comes down to. Goblins have set themselves up in a little kingdom in South Crypt, and the heroes get invited to go and deal with them. And it's how they then choose to deal with it.
I must admit. So before going into like the Goblin King content, I find it kind of fascinating that you kind of merged the kind of it's Lost Mines of Phandelver and the Ice Queen.
Dragon of Ice.
Yeah.
Dragon of Ice Peak. Yeah.
That's really like what was kind of the inspiration behind like choosing to merge those two? Was it more like we kind of like dragons? We kind of like a little bit of we just smushed them together.
For me, it was there. I mean, I've been playing tabletop role-playing games since 1981. The Tom Moldvay version of that basic set was my first set. So I've been doing this a long time. When we set up the group, it was a group of teachers in the UK, all of us, who, to keep ourselves sane, we decided we wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons. So we meet weekly and play. And when I looked at Lost Mines, it wasn't enough there to keep it going for long enough, I didn't think. And merging the two together was actually really easy. They're almost designed to be merged together.
Yeah.
The way that Dragon of Ice Peak is set, it's a drop-in. You can pick things out, drop it all together, put it all together, and it really just merged perfectly.
Yeah.
And actually, what I did was I wrote up the Adventures Weekly and published them on Microsoft Sway.
Oh, really?
So actually, yeah, there's 26 chapters, and it really forms a full book. There's 80,000 words.
Wow. On
there, and of course, I can't publish it anywhere else because of intellectual property rights. So
I was going to say, is that kind of quite indicative of your like DM style then, where you're kind of like almost to be writing out that kind of like sheer level of kind of detail, or is it kind of this is what you've been kind of writing in post, kind of like after you've run through?
It was post, yeah. It was
okay.
After, so after each week when we played, I then sat down afterwards and spent about 2 or 3 hours, wrote up roughly 3,000 words per week.
Yeah.
And then put it all together. Each week I would publish it on Microsoft Sway for the players to read, so they could recap what had happened.
Yeah.
But I also, as I said, I published it on Twitter so that anyone else wanted they could read it. It's still on there, so it's it's on there as my pinned tweet, so people can go on there and read the whole thing if they want at any time. And it is, I think the first one's had about 480 people read the first chapter, and it then declines as you go through it all. But yeah, it's there, and it was fantastic. But it's what then basically was the impetus pushed me to actually write scenarios. I mean, I've been writing scenarios since 1981. I've been doing all of that since I started, but to actually publish it, that was where I got this idea. Right, well, I can do this. I am able to do this, and I published it. And I said the first one went out last year in November, on February 24th, and it was a learning experience because the first thing I got was an email or contact on Twitter by one of the more famous people who writes for DMsGuild, informing me that there was a problem with it. That first time round, I made a mistake. I'd used artwork that I couldn't use.
There definitely is like a rite of passage where I think was it with my first release, I think I'd forgotten the DMsGuild logo, and I had the same thing where like I had to be someone politely contacted me like you need to get a logo on that before you can get a thing. So yeah, no, I think it is almost like a rite of passage for someone to come in and before your product gets removed stealthily, just to kind of sneakily kind of fix things. But
and I was really appreciative of that. I mean, and it meant I took out the maps I put in, which were not suitable. I very quickly created maps of my own. At that point, I used Publisher to actually create the maps. So they were very primitive. I've got to be honest with that. The initial publication had very primitive maps, but the rest of it was actually reasonable. And then
I was going to say, was that almost kind of like the starting point for you to kind of now go on and kind of create your own maps? Is the fact that like was like, oh, I can't use these ones. I'll use Publisher. It's not quite right how I want it. Let me try and find some like map creating software that can.
Exactly, and that was it. It was Publisher was very clunky. It was incredibly clunky. The maps were very primitive. I didn't like them, so I went out there and found something else that I could do it on, which was Incarnate. And I started learning. I taught myself how to use Incarnate, recreated the maps that I wanted to, then put them in. The map of South Crypt is a dwarven fortress. It's actually based on one that was in Dungeon magazine a long time ago.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to Axholm from Dragon of Icespire Peak. And actually, there was one person commented, "Well, you've just reused Axholm," and my comment was, "No, I haven't actually. It's not Axholm.
Yeah,
it's completely." But there is a similarity between the two, and my reasoning, which I turned around and argued back, was, well, it shows the similarity for all dwarven fortresses.
Yeah.
In the Sword Mountains,
dwarves they find their niche. They have a very particular, like, the style of housing that they quite like, and they're just like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So but it's also, I suppose it could also be the fact that from the old Dragon magazine, for when they were maybe putting like the Icespire Keep together, maybe they were looking at the old magazine going, we just kind of reuse this map, like we can like
quite probably
kind of, that kind of cycle goes around, and it's nice that you have kind of found a lore justification for like why these two locations would be similar. Nice.
And I said it went out there, and it did reasonably well, and then I released my second one, and again returned to Icespire Hold. So a follow-on for Dragons of Icespire Peak. They get contacted and get told that Icespire Hold suddenly has new residents in it who've repaired the place, and they go back and they investigate it, and they meet the new residents, which happens to be a white dragonborn sorcerer, stroke cleric of Myrkul.
Okay, but you got it. That's an interesting combo. I must admit, I definitely I love the kind of the products that are kind of the ones, like the adventures that kind of are expanding. Like, as you're going to say, the people who play through Minds of Foundelver or Icespire Keep, there is that kind of point of like, at the end of it, do we just end the campaign there? Because these kind of introductory products, they're almost designed to kind of like allow you to kind of follow on, whereas the fully fledged campaign books, once you've defeated the Frost Maiden, you're kind of like, oh, we're done here, we can start a new campaign. But those little ones, they kind of need, we need a Goblin King to now fight, or
well, there are the official three. There's Divine Contention, was it Stormlord's Wrath? Is the initial follow-on that was of course released. I can't remember the second one, but there's a campaign 3 scenarios, but it moves it from Phandalin to Leyland by the coast. And part of what I did was I actually made use of those myself as well to help give me background and other ideas. And it was moving forward from there. I said the first 3 books I released were scenarios. The third one was called Road Through Crypt Garden.
Okay,
and actually, I managed to send a copy to Ed Greenwood. And he gave me quite a bit of good feedback on it. He actually was really very impressed by it. Was quite happy. Was quite pleased with it. To the point that not a short while later, when I contacted him again about something else, he actually followed me on Twitter. So it was like, oh my god, I'm being followed by Ed Greenwood.
It always those kind of those weird kind of moments where you're just like, oh yeah, they're just a person who created the Forgotten Realms. We're just and now I'm technically, because of the DMsGuild, I can do whatever I want in the Forgotten Realms. It's that weird kind of contrast.
Well, it's not quite that yet, but a lot of my stuff I actually now do talk with Ed quite a bit on these things, and we discuss some of my ideas, and actually some of the ideas that I've now got have come from comments he's made on Twitter, and the scenarios I've released, there's a huge big arc to it that now has completed with the last one I did, where it all relates around Crypt Garden and what's happening in Crypt Garden. And it's 3 scenarios. So you get the road through Crypt Garden, where they explore Crypt Garden, they find out what's going on, they travel to Westbridge. There's the next one after that's called A Nightmare in Crypt Garden, And that was released, let me get this right, around about August time, just about the same time as Van Richten's book came out.
Conveniently timed, yeah.
Because it was a case of, actually, I read Van Richten's book and used some of the ideas.
Yeah.
The whole concept is a person whom at one point had fought the Green Dragon Cloggymatter in Crypt Garden and lost to them and was killed, didn't quite die, and has made a deal that they're going to turn Crypt Garden into a dread realm.
It's that, that's why there is so much kind of like play space in the idea of like someone dies but they're not staying dead, and then in their dying action they're going to be like, I'm spiteful, I'm going to do some bad stuff unless people can kind of stop me.
And I say that it then becomes a scenario of stop this from happening.
Yeah.
And it's the interesting part is who actually is behind getting the heroes involved in stopping this from happening. And it's not who the heroes expect initially.
Interesting.
And I'm not going to say that spoiler, because actually it's one of the parts that comes out of the whole story. They will find that out. And then the third scenario that then led on to this was called Cripgun Ascendancy. And the Green Dragon Cloggymatter has for a long time wanted to basically become immortal. She doesn't want to die.
Yeah.
And with the release of Fizbin, there was that opportunity, and there was something in there that again worked quite nicely. So she's worked out a way to do it, and the heroes have got to stop her from doing it, from ascending.
It's kind of nice because it kind of touches on kind of like just multiple kind of aspects of, again, it's really nice having a kind of like a through line, like a kind of a building story that kind of rewards players for going through kind of each adventure part bit by bit. But then also like in terms of like just kind of creatively, like sometimes when you're reading through like a hardcover book or anything really, and you kind of have that kind of like source of inspiration to almost like to be able to like channel it into like a new product. Like I have all this dragon, like Fizbin has been really good for like, there's so much I want to do with dragons that I can't necessarily just drop anywhere. It doesn't really
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, Cripgun Ascendant, if I remember correctly, has 5 dragons in it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have all 5, haven't you? All the...
It's it very much builds on, again, Forgotten Realms lore. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stuff in there that is from all bits and pieces that have been dropped in the Forgotten Realms and Realms lore and a variety of things. And they in total encounter 5 dragons over the course of the adventure. And of course, the end of it is a huge big battle against the Green Dragon to stop her ascending. So it's a really good scenario. And again, I did consult with Ed on that one quite a bit. He saw a lot of the details beforehand, and he was very, very positive in his idea of what I was doing with it. He felt it was exactly what the Green Dragon would do, what Cloggymatter would do. So he was really quite impressed with it, which was, from my point of view, very uplifting. Made it really good to write it.
I think as well there's what was I gonna say? It was the I've lost my point, but I was gonna say I'll just turn it into a question instead. So for a lot of these kind of like I got this 3 kind of part adventure things, was it the case of like you still kind of running through your home game through each of these bit by bit, and then kind of running away and kind of building and build?
Absolutely, and this is the test. The test base is my players.
Yeah.
They do these things. They work through these. They go through the scenarios. They help me find flaws, the bits and pieces that don't work.
I'm curious then. So, how much would you say some of your like adventures kind of shift from you running it for your home game through the kind of like the writing up process? Do you think there is like a good amount of shifting, or do you think they kind of?
It's on the whole, as I said, it's. With 40 odd years experience doing these scenarios, there's not a huge amount of difference. They're not really. There is a little bit of change in that I'll adjust the monsters maybe slightly. Yeah. Adjust what their abilities are, make it more interesting, and create. A lot of them are created on D&D Beyond, so that I've got them there and people can access them. So it's a case of, again, when I create the monsters and include them in the books, I'm using D&D Beyond to help me design them to make sure they meet the Wizard of the Coast design specs.
Yeah.
Because if D&D Beyond won't let me publish them, there's something wrong.
Would you say that with your home game then you have like a fairly I know it's like the concept of balance is a bit of a weird one, but would you say you have a fairly balanced party? It's not like a I don't know, like 7 bards or something.
No, they're a whole mix. I mean, there's a rogue who's now turning into a ranger as well. So there's a rogue who's becoming a ranger. There's a ranger who's just purely ranger. There's a barbarian. They have changed because the original group, the players have decided they wanted rid of some of the characters because they wanted to change the characters.
Yeah.
So some of them have altered the characters, but it's a fairly balanced group. There's a bard who's also part sorcerer.
Okay,
and he's come up with a really strange concept. He's a tiefling bard who also has dragon blood inside him.
Yeah.
So, and it works, and it's really made it a really interesting character. And I said we've got all of these different characters, and they've all come up with really good concepts. And I'd say it's balanced, but then you've got the high elf blade singer, who, when he casts haste and does blade song, has an armor class of 26, so I can't even hit him.
Yeah, it's at that point of well, I guess we'll just let him dance around, and maybe eventually there'll be a big enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you roll a natural 20, he can't avoid it. Doesn't matter what he does.
It's true. No, and so okay, fair. I must admit, it's that concept there of obviously a balance, especially when it comes to adventure design, is a bit it's nebulous, and it's always that case of trying to kind of it's hard to always design for things that you can't anticipate, like an adventure where there is a locked door. You can't always expect a party to have a rogue. You kind of, it's kind of like there's some levels that you think, okay, well, there's other ways to get through the door, other than just kind of pick a lock. But how do you kind of make sure that the adventure doesn't hinge on a sneaky bastard or what have you?
Well, there's also the creativity side to it. I mean, as the best example there, when my group explored Axholm, which actually became more important in the overall story because of the background of the characters at that point, they decided that to get through the front door of Axholm, which is a huge big iron door, and basically they can't break through it, is the concept. The bard suddenly had this wonderful idea. Well, if we freeze the door and then heat it and do that repeatedly, what's going to happen? And then we hit it with a hammer.
Yeah. Science.
And it was like, okay, fine. Real world physics will still work to a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, superheat a metal, freeze it, it becomes brittle. You then hit it with enough of a force, it is going to break.
Yeah. I think I mentioned this the last week, where it is a case of any kind of situation where the players you kind of have you have to go time out. We now need to Google something about what happens when you superheat and then super freeze metals, and then it's a case of okay, feasibly that might work, and then the rule of cool swooping in to be sure, it works. You shatter this massive door.
Well, this is it. I said we're all school teachers. We're all secondary school teachers. We're a mix across a variety of subjects, so we're fairly confident about these sort of areas. So when it comes to things like science and those sort of concepts, it was no issue. I knew that sort of thing would work, and they could articulate it to me and what they wanted to do. So yeah, we did. I said rule of cool. Yeah. It was a decent idea. They had to do it a few times to make sure it was brittle enough, but then there we go. Yeah. And if somebody else came up with that sort of concept in a scenario and did it to any sort of door, well, it's up to the GM. It's up to the DM if it's their decision. They'd make that decision whether it works or not. Magic works the realm, so why not that?
Yeah.
That was my thoughts.
Yeah. So no. So I actually remember the point I was going to make earlier. So this is great. This is conversation. I'm circling back around because I was building off from the point where we're chatting about kind of building off the Forgotten Realms lore, kind of more generally and broadly. And what I kind of enjoy as using it as essentially like a playground. I mean, that's the benefit of using the DMsGuild, is the fact that you have access to kind of the license. Is the fact that there is like a gap between like, you know, the most up-to-date hardcover books are like coming up to like the year 1500, and a lot of the kind of lore that we have are like 1350s, 1370, like, you know, the kind of like of some of these kind of like niche locations. And that's what I always sometimes find quite freeing is that kind of like flexibility to be like, okay, it has this kind of established lore up to this point. We now have 150 years of who knows what happened, that can really kind of allow you to kind of, you know, take inspiration from what happened, but then kind of put your own kind of unique kind of spin on it. I guess to turn that into a question, what were some of your kind of favorite aspects of the Forgotten Realms lore to kind of twist and tweak?
Well, it is, again, I said, I've got every single edition of D&D that's been included, at least some, and I've got all the 3rd edition books from the Forgotten Realms. Right, so I've got Power of the Realms, I've got Lost Empires, and quite literally, I will be sitting and digging out these books and using these books to put things in. And that was one of the things in Road to Crypt Garden, or Road Through Crypt Garden. There's a scenario in there. It's a 3-part scenario. One of the ones is they explore an ancient tomb. And it quite literally is. It's an ancient tomb that I dug the information out of Lost Empires and plopped it in there.
Yeah.
So it is literally Realms lore reborn within that part, where they're exploring a tomb that was originally put there about 892 Dale Reckoning. And based on all the information, I might have that date quite wrong, but it's round about there.
Yeah, give or take. Well, I think we'll let you off.
Give or take 200 years. But it's literally from there. And it then builds on to what happens now. And in actuality, a lot of Realms lore has been updated.
Yeah.
And if you follow Ed's tweets, he constantly is giving out stuff about current realm, exactly what's happening in the 1490s. And that's part of why I follow him, because it is all of that's there. Yeah. If he puts it out there, then that's it. That's it. It's lore, and you can use it.
I think that's kind of what builds on it, because like obviously like in the kind of lost the idea that there is this Lost Crypt. Again, that kind of works. Like you fast forward 150 years, it's still lost. Nothing's going to be touched. This is something that, like, so when I was doing the Longsaddle Gazetteer, I bumped into a little bit, because you kind of, with people, again, unless they're like elves, they typically don't live to 150 years. So then it's kind of going that kind of like generational gap of like, okay, well, this person was kind of, you know, a key NPC in, you know, the kind of in 3rd edition kind of thing. Do they have grandchildren? Like, if they don't, like, what do we do? What happens to their business? Does it just exist? You know, so those are kind of fun challenges in their own way. But no, I definitely kind of appreciate those kind of like, I don't know, it feels a lot like mining for gems, you know, and suddenly you uncover this kind of lore gem, and it's like, this is perfect. I can
and that's it. There's so much in those 3rd edition books, and even the 4th edition books, but there's not as many 4th edition books related to the realms. But there's so much within those, and even going back as far as 2nd edition, which I've got the campaign setting for Forgotten Realms campaign setting. There's bits and pieces you can dig out from there and then build on. I mean, the whole point of South Crypt. South Crypt is mentioned in Volo's Guide to the North. And you then go and search through Ed's Realms lore, and you actually find that he's not allowed to talk about South Crypt.
Yeah.
There's an NDA on it.
Really?
Yeah. He can't tell you anything about South Crypt.
That's mysterious.
Well, at some point or other in the past, TSR, Wizards, Hasbro, they obviously had an idea of what they wanted to do with South Crypt.
Yeah.
But they've never done anything.
Yeah.
But he's still tied by that NDA. So he can't talk about South Crypt. And the only information that's mentioned in Volo's Guide to the North is that it was a dwarven fortress, an old silver mine, and that about 13 something 1350s roughly. It was invaded by a hill giant vampire.
Which is, I'll be honest, an awesome combination. I can't imagine anything worse than combining giant things with things that want to drink your blood.
And it was then a case of, right, okay, this is where the situation is. That's all you get. That's the only information you have about South Crypt. So it really is picking just that little gem up, as you said, and running with it.
Yeah.
Because whatever you create for it is then lore. You can't be contradicted until Wizards of the Wizards of the Coast actually publish something.
Yeah. Which I think, I think was it, especially if the NDA is still withstanding now, I think you're fairly confident that there's probably not anything in the immediate future coming out about. No. So I think you're good for a little. But that's what I mean. It is that case of particularly the players who base their home games within the Forgotten Realms lore. There are moments where it's just like, okay, well, they're going on a journey between two locations, and they come across points on a map where they're just like, I don't know anything about this, and the DM's Guild can almost be like a first resource to be like, I've never heard of South Crypt. Type it in. Oh, look, this is perfect. What I need, some kind of drag and drop content for the players as they kind of pass through. But I did kind of want to mention that. So then, kind of to pop adventures to one side, which as an adventure writer, I'm lamenting to do. I kind of wanted to chat a little bit about some of your other design work.
I mean, the maps. I said Incarnate became my way of building my maps, and it was just fiddling around with it, developing my skills in it. So I decided that the best way to do that was, let's actually make Phandalin. There's so many buildings in Phandalin. Let's actually make them.
Yeah.
And that's where I started. I started doing that just to help myself. Rebuilt maps from other scenarios. The Wayside Inn, one of the ones I did for that. Again, the Wayside Inn is a location in Stormlord's Wrath.
Mm-hmm.
That is located where the Treebor Trail meets the high roads to Neverwinter, and it's a location for people to stop at.
Yeah.
And the map they give you is it's in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere nearby for 50 miles each direction, and they give you 2 levels to the inn. And I was going, wait a minute, the inn's staffed. Where are the staff living?
Yeah.
So I designed it. I added another level to the inn, and then at the time I was actually doing roping the RPG workshops.
Oh, yeah.
I was doing the Storytellers Guild, and I was doing the encounter workshop where it was designed 1-page encounter, and I'd come up with this really nice one called The Heroes of Miraketh. Okay. Or rather, let's give it its full title: The Magnificent Heroes of Miraketh. Might give you a hint where it came from. Where the heroes are in a local inn, their normal local inn, when they get approached by these 2 very heavily shrouded characters. They're directed by the innkeeper over to the heroes. They speak with a rather strange accent. They're completely covered in furs and so forth, so you can't even see their features. And suddenly these other people turn up who are a group of mercenaries, and they go, why are you wanting to work with these people? Why are you even talking to them? As they pull the hood off one of them and reveal that they're 2 orcs.
Yeah.
And the orcs have set up a little village called Miraketh, and they're being attacked by this group of mercenaries.
Yeah. It kind of flips the kind of traditional script on its head of...
Yeah. And it's got nothing whatsoever to do with the Magnificent Seven at all. But it was the first encounter in that way. I did that as the encounter, and it then went, oh, wait a minute, I can do more of these.
Yeah.
I put 10 of them together.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And put them into a book, and it's like, I need somewhere for them. The Wayside Inn.
Yeah.
So Encounters at the Wayside Inn therefore became another booklet I released.
I was gonna say, it's kind of like fascinating when like almost like your projects kind of align. Like when you're doing like completely unrelated things, and just for whatever reason you have that like light bulb moment where it's just like, wait a minute, we can bring them together, and it kind of like it becomes even better than what it was before, because it's a case of like now we have it's not just a generic inn, we have like a particular location, and now you can kind of you can pinpoint more things in the map.
Absolutely, and you have as I said, in these the 10 encounters are some really fun ones. Again, being British, you'll probably get this reference. You've got the innkeeper who owns the inn and runs the inn, who's called Morticia, and her cook is called Cora. And one of the times the heroes are visiting the inn, Cora comes rushing out of the kitchen, chasing this baby cockatrice, and keeps shouting at the baby cockatrice, Morticia, Morticia, and is chasing the cockatrice all the way round the inn.
I'm trying my hardest. I'm trying to catch the reference.
Well, if I turned around and said, let's take a 1970s sitcom based in Torquay.
I wouldn't be able to tell you that. I'm afraid.
Basil Fawlty.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep.
It's based on the old episode where Manuel is chasing his rat round the place, and the rat's called Basil.
Yeah. I must admit, there definitely is something to like these kind of like almost like iconic moments within kind of like just media as a whole, like pop culture, and recreating them in kind of like D&D. That there is like there's so much space. Like it's almost a reward for the people who identify them, but then equally for the people who like myself who don't get the reference on the first thing. I'm still having fun. I'm still dealing with the the encounter as it is before me of like, how are we going to try and stop this tiny cockatrice before it causes havoc?
Yeah, exactly. And it is. It's a huge comedy moment, because you have literally this comedy moment, this chase going on, and how do the heroes stop it? But it's then the ones that pick up where it comes from are like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And just little things like that happen throughout it. So I said that was all built from the fact that I built these maps, the map of the Wayside Inn. I rebuilt them all, and then it was a case of right. I've got these. Technically, I can't publish them on their own because they're maps that are based on original content. But if I add this into it, I can publish them. And that's where a lot of it came from. But yeah, I mean, the maps I started, I've now released 4 map packs in total, and all of them, they're all related to stuff that comes from Lost Mines and from Dragon of Iceberg Peak, and it's just maps for those areas and building on those.
Yeah, it sounds like you've carved out a section of the Sword Coast that you just like. I like this area. This is.
It's where everything's been set, and it's where the stuff has been set for such a long time. So it makes perfect sense in that way. The backgrounds, I've got, I say, 2 unique backgrounds, which was that was an interesting one, because Spellfire. You may have heard of Spellfire before. Goes all the way back to 3rd edition, in fact, before 3rd edition, and of course the book that Ed wrote way back then. And it's something that is like that's something that hasn't been brought in. No one's brought it into 5th edition yet that I could find. And I went, how am I going to do it? Because it works. Anyone can use Spellfire. Anyone potentially can use Spellfire. So how do you create a mechanic that's going to allow that?
Yeah. And
I then suddenly thought, wait a minute, there is actually a mechanic that exists already. In D&D 5th edition, of course, at level 4, level 8, level 12, you pick either an ability score or a feat.
Yeah, you can tie it in with a feat perfectly.
And it was a case of, right, Spellfire becomes an ability. They can, instead of one of those, they can pick a Spellfire ability. And suddenly it was a way of actually testing it worked. And it works. It's a way to actually then do it. Like you said, it's creating them as a feat. They become special feats that they can, a Spellfire wielder, someone who's got the background of Spellfire, can access these. So initially it's a background that they pick as something there, but the background is open to anyone. Any class can pick this background.
Yeah, it's like it was. I mean, like it's a good number of the feats are kind of like have prerequisites anyway, so it kind of like builds on kind of like existing kind of content beforehand as well.
Exactly, and it was, how do I use the rules as they are to make Spellfire work? And then it was a case of, right, it works for that. Can I do it again?
Yeah.
So the next one I did was called Blood of the Lichen, and it took the lore of lycanthropy from realms, and a case of, right, you're in somewhere in your past, your family has lycanthropy in it. You've still got some access to those abilities.
Yeah.
You're not a full lycanthrope. You don't turn into a lycanthrope, but you've got special abilities that you can access, and you get to choose. And at every point there was more complex to that, because I covered all the different lycanthropes. So there's
a good number of
options for werewolves, for werebears. Yeah, and at each point where they can pick a feat, there's about 3 different options. So there's a flexibility, so that no 2 Lichen Blood will be the same.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was one of these factors that, and again, just happened to be released about middle of October.
It's spooky month, that's everyone wants to be like a werewolf or a vampire. It just happens.
These sort of things. And it is, a lot of the time, some of the concepts I've come up with have tied in to specific dates, just because they will work with those and they make a good option to do. It is making sure that they work and give them that. And then the subclasses, I've now, with yesterday, I released one yesterday. There's I think 7 subclasses now that I've created.
Yeah.
Again, all of them are realms based, and a lot of them are again from the same sort of area. There's Wardens of Neverwinter, which is a ranger subclass. Druids of Neverwinter, which actually reboots an old druid circle, and it was quite nice because I actually updated this just after Christmas. I'd asked Ed a question on Realms lore about what druid circles existed in the 1490s in Neverwinter Woods.
Yeah.
So he came back and gave an answer suddenly, explaining the 3 druid circles that he had in the Neverwinter Woods. And I went, oh, right, okay, let's put that. I'm going to change this. I'm going to
I just need to make 1 or 2 tiny tweaks and then...
Yeah. But it was really nice because it suddenly meant that the original edition suddenly became even more relevant.
Yeah.
So the 2 I've released most recently is Knights in Silver and the Spell Guard. Now again, they're both from 3rd edition, from Silvery Moon.
Yeah.
Knights in Silver were the fighters of Silvery Moon, and the Spell Guard were the wizards.
So it's bit by bit kind of like basically allowing people to kind of more who are kind of basing their characters more enriched within the Forgotten Realms lore. They have like, again, a more tailored subclass. They're not just like a wizard. They are a wizard of like Silvery Moon or, a warrior or what have you.
Exactly. And again, both of these, actually before they were even published, I did consult with Ed on both of these ones. So he saw them both. He looked at them both. He fed back to me in some parts of it. And it was literally... He looked at what I'd done with them and said, yeah, these are really nice. And even with the Spell Guard, he made a comment to me about that, saying that it met the feel of what he thought the Spell Guard were.
It's nice, like, to have, to be able to speak with Ed, the source of the lore and everything himself, to just have as like a bouncing board. It feels like it's going to be like, it's kind of what you kind of want for every kind of project.
I'm not going to disturb him with every project, but certainly with ones, and even the current project I'm working on, there was a comment on Twitter. Somebody asked Ed what he would like for Christmas. Or not necessarily what he would like. What would he like? What would some of his characters in the realms like for Christmas? And he made a comment on there, and my reply to it was, "Stop giving me ideas."
Yeah. Well,
And he went, well, then go on then. If you want the idea, run with it. So the current project, and this is partly where Spellguard and the Knights in Silver came from. The current project I'm doing is called Silver Moon Rising.
Okay.
And it's an adventure for levels 13 to 15. So it's actually quite a high level adventure.
Yeah.
And it again is based in the 1490s of the Forgotten Realms. If you know the lore of that part, Silvery Moon lost its status because of the war against Netheril. They didn't support one of the other locations in the Silver Marches. Dwarven City got sacked, and as a result, the whole Silver Marches Confederation fell apart, and Silvery Moon lost its position of power and its status. And it was a case of Illustrio, who was the original 3rd edition High Mage of Silvery Moon, and who started the Silver Marches Confederation, and who's believed to be dead.
The classic believed to be.
Well, it's actually been admitted she's not. The books have actually, the Second Sundering, she turns up in the Second Sundering books. So she actually, she's not known by characters in the realms to be alive yet. But she is known, if you've read the books, know she's alive. And Ed's comment was she would like to see Silvery Moon regain its position.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, so let's write a political intrigue.
Yeah, I mean, it's the time for it. I mean, like all the kind of like pieces are in position, and I do. It's like I do kind of appreciate the semi-pun of like Silvery Moon Rising. That's clever. I like that.
Yeah. And it is, and they said, that's the start of it. That's the name. The ideas there as to what's going to happen in it. I've just got to write it now.
Wow. So no, honestly, it's kind of been fantastic to kind of hear about like everything through your kind of catalog, the way you've kind of gone about it and kind of dug into each things. We kind of spoken a little bit about like your creative process and where the kind of your ideas kind of almost like are stemming from either inspirations of lore or from your kind of home games. But I'm kind of curious then, what would you say are like your, from start to finish, what are your like favorite and least favorite parts of like the project?
My favorite part is gathering the artwork and actually doing the writing, writing the bits, creating the encounters that happen within that. So actually looking at how can I make this interesting? How can I make it work and make it into something a bit more than just you walk into a room and there is this thing there. Yeah. One of the examples in Cripgun Ascendancy, there's a bit where they're searching for a lost sword called the Dragon Shard.
Okay.
And they walk in, they eventually, after they find where it's located, they enter a room where stuck into the floor in the room is a crystal amethyst sword with a dragon hilt on it, and seated at the throne in this room is a forest hag, which is a creature I created for this to work.
Yeah.
And she's having a conversation with the sword.
Yeah.
And the sword stopped, and the sword just turned around and said, well, I think the situation's now been taken out of your hand if you look at who's just come in the room. And it's like, this is now, where do they go? Because do the party attack?
Yeah.
Do they actually try and hold a conversation with the forest hag and the sword?
Yeah. I do like the idea of a snarky sword, of just giving a little bit of sassle.
Well, there's a little bit more to the sword than that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give that away.
Yeah, no, you got was it? Keep something for people to kind of like dig into as they kind of like read through it. Then, okay. So if the writing is your favorite part, then what's the other side of the coin?
It would have. I'm going to say it has got to be the advertising. That is the bane. I've got to do it. I know I've got to advertise. Yeah. I do a lot of that on Twitter. I am quite prolific at it, and particularly on Saturdays. There's something called Self Promo Saturday.
Yeah.
And I've become quite prolific. I will sit there, but it's tedious. You've got to sit there. You've got to do it. Yeah. You've got to do the advertising if you're going to get your product to sell.
Yeah.
But it is probably the part I hate
Yeah, I mean it's tough because like you got to advertise like your new stuff. You have to, again, like there's no reason not to advertise your old stuff, just because these products, they're not time sensitive. They're not going to go off or go old. And rather than kind of letting some of your first products gather dust, you can be like, hey, I mean that's why I like the DM's Guild system of like the medal, because anytime like a product reaches like kind of new medal, that's a justification to be like, you blow your horns, absolutely. You shake your bells,
and this is it. I said in less than a year, I've achieved 3 silver medals and 6. Actually, no, I get this right. 3 scenarios of silver medals. 3 of my map packs have silver medals.
Nice.
And I've got 3 copper medals as well. So I've got a total of 9 medals.
Yeah.
If you count the fact that the silver medals have already had to be copper. In total, I've achieved 15 medals over the course of less than a year.
It's almost a shame that they don't like mail you a real copper medal or like so.
I'm quite happy with the way they do it. It works fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's then pushing forward to get to the next level, as you said. But yeah, it's fantastic when you get that. I mean, the New Year's Day was when I got my last copper medal.
Oh, that's a nice way to. Yeah.
First day of the year, and one of my scenarios turns copper. It's like brilliant, yay!
So, I was gonna say, kind of like building on that. Then I think like as well, what's kind of been nice about this chat as well, I think kind of like scattered throughout. You've kind of mentioned like a lot of kind of like really interesting design choices you kind of made and kind of like inserted through. So I'm tempted to kind of like, if you don't mind, I might skip that because we have like the Hag of the Sword, we have like the taking inspiration from the Vampire Giant. There's oodles of like really, really kind of awesome design choices. So I am kind of curious to hear, like, again, especially as you're approaching your like 1 year anniversary, what would you say is like one of the, like the core lessons you've kind of wish you'd learned sooner?
The thing that I learned, I said the biggest lesson I've learned is actually being able to do things like the incarnate. Incarnate was a big eye opener.
Yeah.
Because it meant I could make my maps, I could do things. The other one, artwork. Finding reasonable artwork. I mean, okay, I'm a Scotsman. I'm cheap.
Yeah.
Pixabay was brilliant.
Yeah.
Free artwork.
Yeah, and I think it definitely is like it's quite interesting when you kind of like almost refine your process of like finding art and the way you kind of go about it, because you can get really creative with like, I know that so RP Davis is like a big proprietor of like using like open source like art libraries. So things where you can have all these ornate portraits which are all kind of like free to use and stuff like that, and it's like that would be perfect for this one NPC in this one location and other such things. So yeah, you can get really kind of creative with how you source your art without
I mean, if I get more prolific and become more successful, I will certainly look at commissioning art, because it's something. There are so many fantastic artists out there on the tabletop RPG network, I would love to be able to support them and give them more.
Yeah.
And when I get to that point where I can, I will definitely do that.
Yeah.
I mean, the artwork I'm now using, I'm still using Pixabay for a lot of the artwork, but again, I've found 1 or 2 programs online that allow me to modify it. So it no longer just looks as if it's a plain piece of artwork. It actually changes the nature of it.
Yeah.
And it starts making it look more individualized.
I think I remember once, again, a similar kind of portrait. I found this image for a character that was perfect, other than the fact that the portrait was human and the character I wanted was an elf. So I spent probably too long than I needed to just pointing out their ears to kind of just have that little touch. Like, perfect. I'm an artiste now. I've got it. But no, yeah, I'm just with you. And I think there is coming, like, once you kind of begin to kind of commission artists, I think it's kind of very gratifying in its own sense, because it is kind of like it is a one-to-one translation of your words to art, rather than kind of like your words to cobbling together. So again, taking a portrait and adding elfish to it to try and make it work within your kind of thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, it's a whole kind of thing. No, awesome. Well then, I guess, geez, hot damn. Well, I guess, kind of a kind of through line has kind of been, for you kind of like working through on Twitter and stuff like that, and kind of getting involved with Self Promotion Saturday, obviously chatting with Ed a lot, and just kind of getting involved as well with the kind of was it Write an Encounter for the RPG Writer Workshop.
The Storytellers Collective, I would recommend it to anyone. Anyone who wants to do that, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I've had the privilege to kind of chat to like many graduates of these kind of programs, and each and every year, like, you know, all these kind of new authors kind of getting involved. But my question is so with all these kind of like, you know, different approaches to getting involved with the, you know, the tabletop RPG industry, who are like some of the people in the kind of community that have kind of been particular sources of inspiration?
The person that reached out to me first and is probably the person whom I really do appreciate the support they've given me throughout the time, Anthony Joyce Rivera, who again, he's very big on DMsGuild. One of the ones he's done, he was involved in the Zentrim book that they released, Secrets of the Zentrim. He helped write that. He Blood Hunter, he wrote a scenario for Blood Hunters that is based in Vandal. It was one of his first ones. But again, it's so many things he's done, and again, he's got a huge selection of stuff on the guild. He's definitely one of the ones that I really have been impressed with, and if I got the opportunity to work with him at some point, I would jump at it.
It's kind of like there are like a number of the stories of like, again, the people who kind of are there towards like the start of your career. I don't like, it feels weird like adding those kind of labels, but like, and then as you kind of develop, you can kind of look back and like think of like, I'm going from like, you know, kind of like, you know, being like I don't know, like baby faced industry wise, and then to like be like now we're like collaborators, you know. The whole thing has kind of gone almost like full circle. It's lovely when you reach those points. Yeah,
and I say the other one, an inspiration, yes, but again, if I got the opportunity to work with him, I would jump at it. MT Black, again, he's one of the ones who a DMsGuild adept, if I remember correctly, as well. The adept program is one of the ones that seems to have fallen by the wayside to a degree.
Yeah.
But he started releasing stuff back in 2015, 16, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And in his first year, he released, I think, I can't remember exactly. I think it's about 12 scenarios.
Like, I think there are a number of individuals where they're kind of like, you look at their yearly output and it's like, what is going on there? That is prolific.
And that was it. And to be honest, that was one of my goals. Not to outdo him, because it's not that, but it was, can I actually produce something at that sort of level? Can I produce enough to match that?
Yeah,
I've not quite achieved that within the number of scenarios I've released.
Yeah.
But overall,
yeah. I think in terms of like as a writer and a creative and kind of your approach, the kind of having a diversity of products and stuff like that, I think it's also good from a creative standpoint, because I think I've done the thing where I've like, I want to write X number of encounters, and it is easier like when you're doing one thing consistently and you're just kind of, it's easier to burn out, you know, because you kind of every now and then you want that kind of like create freedom to kind of, you know, jump out. And yeah, I think it's kind of like a, you know, if you want to be like, I want to write adventures, write a subclass every now and then, you know, treat yourself.
And exactly, it is. It's an adventure can take me 2 to 3 weeks to write and do properly and really set it up. I can create a subclass in a day.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of like, but in fairness, like I in the same way I kind of sometimes approach adventure design much like I approach subclasses, because subclasses it is quite formulaic. You kind of have your beats to kind of hit, and I kind of bring that again. It doesn't work for every adventure, just because adventures are so nebulous, they're so wiggly. But Jim, that's something that I've found like almost like copying those processes across has helped me in some way. It goes back to like just a good template, I suppose.
And that's the key, and it's a template. I mean, everything I've done, I actually use Microsoft Publisher, for most of my stuff, and I've got a template. Literally, I created a template. I know there's a template on DMsGuild that was released. It's a Word template, but I did get it, and I looked at it and I went, it's okay, but there's some stuff about it that I just don't like. That it doesn't work in the way I want it to.
I mean, a good part of like becoming a creative is kind of identifying your tools and working with your tools as that kind of develops and stuff like that. And a good chunk of that is looking at what else is available to kind of work out if it, suits you.
And absolutely. And it was a case of I took the template from the Word and I basically adapted it into Publisher.
Yeah.
And it made it easier to do things because you can put the artwork in Publisher so much more easily. It doesn't cause many problems as trying to put artwork into
Word does like to throw images about the place every now and then.
Yeah. So with Publisher, you've got a lot more flexibility in that. You can create the text boxes. You've got so much more options as to how you can set things up. And that became my template. And then the biggest thing is that, of course, that with Publisher, you can save it as JPEGs. So you can take your cover artwork that you've done, save it as a JPEG, which you then go straight away to lay into DMsGuild as there's my cover as a JPEG.
Yeah.
You can save it as a PDF. So you can take the document you've created and turn it straight into PDF. And the advantage I have, because of my role as a teacher, I actually have a license of my own from Adobe. I've got an Adobe license, which allows me to take PDFs and turn them into Word documents.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And now there's a logic behind my madness here. I will create the document in Publisher, turn it into a PDF, turn the PDF into a Word document, and edit the Word document.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because
it's a case of like sometimes describing your workflow to other people, they always give you like the weird, but it is a case of like whatever works. Like that kind of makes sense because obviously, like I imagine Publisher probably isn't the best for editing for understandable reasons.
The editing software in Publisher is limited, and it is really limited, unfortunately. So editing software in Word is so much more powerful because it will look at the grammar, it will look at how often you've done things, so it will look at sentence structure and advise you if something doesn't work right. So you actually get a much more full editing process. And it allows me to edit documents quite nicely, and then of course just tweak them in Publisher. So I'll work through the process of editing it as a Word document, tweak the Publisher document. Once the Publisher document matches the Word document, recreate the PDF, and then publish the PDF.
So it just works. It just works.
And it's why I've been able to be so prolific and be able to do these in such a quick turnover. It allows me, and I'm editing my own documents. I'm not like nobody else is actually editing them. But my father was an English teacher for 30 years.
I imagine it passes down bit by bit.
My English is fairly decent. I'm not going to say I'm amazing, but my English is decent.
Yeah.
And that means that I've got confidence, and with Word, I've got confidence in what the Word document does for the grammar and the spelling structures and so forth. So I'm checking. The awkward part, of course, is you've got to do it in American.
Yeah, honestly, they can pry my youth from my cold dead corpse.
So yeah, I've had to get used to writing in American English instead of British.
I like it doesn't help. Like I have like writing duties for like just what I do day to day, and those aren't in American English, so I have to kind of sometimes flip between the two of like, no, I can have this you. But Carl, looking at the time, we've done it. An hour has flown by. It's been delightful, kind of from start.
Thank you very much. It's been delightful as well to speak to yourself.
Yeah. But obviously, one thing I do want to do before we leave is obviously one, hear about some of the cool stuff that you've got working on, and secondly, obviously, where can people stay up to date with all your comings and goings, just your work.
I'm my username on Twitter is Heimdall. So HEIMDAYL.
Nice.
And I've had that since 2011. And before anyone says, no, I actually had it before Heimdall came in Marvel Universe.
Nice.
My great-grandfather was from Denmark. That's where the name Vandal comes from. I'm actually descended from Vikings. No, not joking. Where my great-grandfather came from was a Viking raiding port called Bornholm.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and of course, Viking lore, Heimdall is the Watcher, the one who watches the Rainbow Bridge, and that's why I chose the name, and I've just stuck with it.
Yeah.
And therefore, if anyone wants to follow me, they can find me on there as Heimdall. Twitter's the best place because I'm constantly on there, interacting with the people in the Twitter community, the tabletop role-playing game community on there. I'm advertising on there. I am on Facebook, and I'm on Reddit as well, and on Discord. So I'm in all those, and I will advertise on those as well.
Yeah.
But Twitter's probably the best place if you want to find me and talk to me. And I'm quite open to talking to people. I've supported other people.
Yeah.
I've taken on board what was done for me, I will do for others. I quite happily help others. So more than happy to speak to anyone who wants to start doing this themselves. And I'll give them hints and tips and whatever they need.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, lovely. Well, honestly, Carl, thank you so much for this. I was about to say it's been a delight again, but I'm going to say it's been a delight because it has been.
Thank you very much indeed, Matthew. It's been brilliant speaking to you.
Yeah. So, other than that, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. I should have an adventure out by now. I don't know. I might do that. There might be a thing where at the start of this episode there may be an advertisement for that. I don't know. That's a future problem. But it leads me to my last and favorite question, which is how do we end a podcast?
Having never ended a podcast before, I'm not really sure.
No, me neither. Like you would think I would know. I just don't.
I'll just have to say thank you very much for the time that you've given me, and all the best for the future on this. And I look forward to actually being able to watch this properly when it goes live on DMsGuild House. Thank you very much indeed. Take care and all the best.
All the best.